Welcome to Get Rich Education. I'm your host, Keith Feinhold, with a brief history lesson of interest rates, banks cutting HELOCs today, more pandemic effects for real estate and business, and then another way for you to turn crisis into opportunity with the newly passed CARES Act. All that and more today on Get Rich Education. The people that our listeners can't stop talking about are Ridge Lending Group and MLS 42056. They provided you with more loans than anyone. It's where I got my last few loans, and they finance single-family income property up to fourplexes. They're the number one lender for both beginners and veterans. Start your pre-qualification, chat with President Chaley Ridge personally, and you'll end up with your custom plan for expanding your cash flowing portfolio. Start at ridgelendinggroup.com.
You're listening to the show that has created more financial freedom than nearly any show in the world. This is Get Rich Education.
Here it is. Hey, welcome to Get Rich Education. I'm your host, Keith Weinhold, and I'm grateful that you're here. Recent events make you almost completely reevaluate what our society became before the pandemic. The angle I'm talking about is one that real estate investing author John T. Reed recently wrote. John is a generation or two older than me, so he's got more life experience. Here it is. John T. Reed says, "The shutdown has made me, if not others, realize that our, quote, great economy is about half fluff. Salons, spas, gourmet doggy treats, computer games, Starbucks, and that it is also about half financed by the Fed conjuring money out of thin air. The age-old formula for business success was to find a need and fill it. I'd add the adverb profitably because of the dot-com boom and its successors who do not seem to respect the need for a profit. Now, the American formula seems to be inflate the money supply to unprecedented levels and sell trivial luxuries to the artificially enriched public." John goes on to say, "When I was a kid in the 1950s, a shopping center had a supermarket, maybe a Rexall drugstore, hard good merchants in various types like five and dime stores, department stores. What we did not have in shopping centers then were movie theaters, banks, salons, spas, restaurants, and gyms. This is not find a need. It is find a person with too much money burning a hole in their pocket and give them some flimsy excuse to get rid of some of it." That is from author John T. Reed. Check him out at johntreed.com. So that's interesting. He's saying that today's society has all these businesses that are kind of foofy and unnecessary, and I do see his point. I also guess then the natural follow-up question I would have for this is, how much luxury are we entitled to? Just how much? I think that every generation aspires to progress, but how much luxury and maybe even pampering is too much? Well, those highly unnecessary businesses like spas, restaurants, and theaters, they're the ones that are in trouble now amidst this recession that I call the Great Shutdown. Another perspective this gives me is the gratefulness that we're investing in residential housing, even amidst this recession. The rent collection rate on my own properties is almost 100%, although unusually high number did pay the rent late. Now, I think that a lot of landlords and investors, surely not everyone, but many, you're finding that more tenants are able to pay the rent than you expected, considering all of the layoffs. And surely we're not out of the woods yet, and the layoffs are substantial, and the crisis is not over. But I've got a reason why I see more tenants being able to pay the pandemic rent to you than you expected, and you might not have thought about this before. Yes, we know that tenants got the stimulus check. Often they're receiving hefty unemployment compensation. The PPP, which is the Payment Protection Program, that's going to allow a lot of businesses to rehire their employees quickly, and it will enable businesses who have retained their employees to keep those employees. So yes, there have been all these government infusions of money to help support tenants and others. Now, all those things that I mentioned, they regard your tenant's personal income. But what about your tenant's personal monthly expenses? See, I didn't have this realization until I received my own Bank of America personal credit card statement recently. I noticed that my expenses were substantially lower when I read that monthly statement of mine. Well, look, everyone's expenses are lower because no one is traveling anywhere. Yeah, this includes your tenant. So your tenant isn't spending money at concerts or in theaters or at gyms or wherever. So many tenants are getting this government support to pay the rent, and at the same time, their expenses are lower. This might be why you're seeing more tenants able to pay the rent than what we thought. Switching gears here, I've talked before about how if your salary is your only source of income, then you are one step away from poverty or a substantially diminished quality of life. So have multiple income streams. For so many people, their job is their only income stream. So even in good times, they're beholden to it. And now in crisis times, it can make life more unbearable if you've only got one source of income. For example, just take the case of Megan Peroni. She's a nurse, and she can't even begin to help her 8-year-old daughter with her schoolwork until after Megan gets home from work and has cleaned up from dinner. Her husband works from home, but he spends most of the week holed up in the basement because his job is mainly done by phone. That leaves the couple's second-grade daughter to supervise her 2-year-old sister. And as a result, the family has pushed the weekly load of schoolwork to weekends, and then they try to cram as much into 2 days as they can. In fact, one recent Saturday, Peroni's husband and daughter finished a science project at 10 p.m. Peroni, who lives in Ebensburg, Pennsylvania, said, "We don't have the luxury right now to not be working. Some people aren't working at all, and they can make time to help with classwork, but that for us is just not an option." And that's the end of what she said. So those with older children may be faring better, but parents still must keep track of timing for video chats with teachers and make sure all the assignments are completed. I mean, not an option were the 3 words that this poor, hardworking mother gave. So rather than be in that situation, give yourself options in life. Have multiple diverse income streams. Options means a better degree of freedom. In the broader economy, the GDP contracted 4.8% in quarter 1 of this year. It could be minus 30% for the quarter that we're in now. There have been more businesses reopening. Many expect the economy to begin ramping up again in July. Some economists see us forming a V pattern, thinking that we'll climb up out of the economic hole as fast as we fell into it. I don't think that we will. I think we'll see more of a Nike swoosh-shaped recovery, long and slow. Elsewhere, another casualty of the Great Shutdown is that CNBC recently reported that more than half of mall department stores should be closed by next year. More than half, just by next year. We're talking permanent closures. We're talking about your Nordstrom, your Macy's, your JCPenney's, Sears, Dillard's, Lord & Taylor. The Nordstrom in my home city already shut down for good last year. Big retailers like department stores were already in trouble before the pandemic began. Malls are going to have to undergo a major repurposing. Just astonishing. As for residential real estate, Chase Bank already stopped accepting home equity lines of credit applications last month. And more recently, Wells Fargo also jumped in, and they announced that they're cutting off originating any new HELOCs as well. Get ready to hear more news like that. See, part of what's really going on here is that banks are still giving out new loans, of course, but they're often with more stringent requirements. But banks don't like the second lien position that they're often stuck in with HELOCs. That means if you've got your first mortgage on your primary residence with, say, Bank of America, and a second mortgage as a HELOC with Wells Fargo, and say you would default on your payments and your home were foreclosed upon, then Bank of America would get paid first, and then Wells Fargo would only get paid second if there's anything left over, since Wells is in second lien position. Another way to say that is that the second lien holder, Wells Fargo in this case, is subordinate to Bank of America, the holder of the first lien on the property. The second must subordinate to the first. That's why banks don't want to originate new seconds. Today, we do have low mortgage rates enticing buyers, but that's been more than offset by low employment. What about the direction of home prices? Well, the National Association of Realtors says that in 2020, the U.S. median home price is likely to gain 1.4%. And of course, there really is no such thing as a national real estate market. There will be winners and losers with home prices, depending on what region you're in. Many say that this pandemic is going to want to make people move to the suburbs. I think it's too early to say whether that's happened or not. Others say that because more people in the future are going to want to stay at home, and even others will start working from home that hadn't previously, they say that car sales are going to tank and that there will be less demand for cars. I would say not so fast, not really. Remember, people don't want to be around a bunch of other people, and that's why they want to drive their own personal car for privacy and for isolation. So instead, trends can lead to a decline in the use of public transportation like buses and elevated trains and subways. And then there's autonomous cars whose mass adoption could decentralize urban real estate. But who knows? No one really knows. 20 to 25 years ago, people were predicting that the internet would decentralize cities, and it did not. That did not happen. In fact, with the internet, society actually increased urbanization. Now, mortgage interest rates, yes, they have hit a brand new all-time low. I mean, all-time low. I want to tell you just how low they are. But first, to get an appreciation for this, let's build some context and take a brief look at interest rate history over the last 50 years. As I've mentioned before, August 15th, 1971, President Nixon addressed the nation saying that the dollar would no longer be pegged to the gold standard. And if you watch that address, he blamed speculators for why he was doing this. Do you have any idea, though, what the 30-year fixed amortizing mortgage rate was that week that he said that? It was 7.7%. A few years later, by the mid-70s, as inflation started to heat up, mortgage rates reached up to 10%. And by 1981, mortgage rates hit their all-time high of 18%. And if you know your economic history, you'll know that Federal Reserve Chairman Paul Volcker, this tall 6'7" guy, who served in the early and mid-'80s under Presidents Jimmy Carter and Ronald Reagan, Volcker unpopularly pushed interest rates high to try to hammer down against this runaway inflation. High rates, of course, counter inflation because it prevents businesses from borrowing and expanding. They resist paying those high rates. Basically, Volcker's plan worked, and interest rates really started falling through the mid and late 80s. Now, let's listen to a television commercial ad from that time to see what interest rates were. It's for automobile financing. Car dealers are just more aggressive advertisers than home mortgage companies, so that's why we're not listening to old mortgage television ads. But there is that general positive correlation between house and car rates. This is from about 1982, as this car salesman is proudly walking around the auto dealership lot wearing a suit and tie. Let's listen.
Let the good times roll. GMAC has rolled back car and truck financing rates to 12.8% through May 31st. Yes, your participating GM dealer now has the deal you've been waiting for at just 12.8. Get that new GM car or light-duty truck at this low 12.8 rate and save hundreds of dollars.
Hey, like he says, let the good times roll. And I mean, do you have any better idea of a good time than paying a 12.8% APR for a Chevrolet El Camino? Notice that he's hardly even talking about any features or benefits that the car has for you. It's about that 12.8% rate. That low 12.8 is actually the main selling feature here. It's not even about the car. It's about that low rate. Now, this next one is well documented that it is from 1983, so about a year later here than the last one. Let's see what happened to rates.
Here's big news from GMAC about low financing. Participating GM dealers are now offering low 11.9% GMAC financing on all new 83 GM cars and light trucks. 11.9% financing, not on just a few selected models, but every new GM car and light truck. Offer good until March 31st. See your GM dealer for details.
If you really want it, we can help you get it. We're GMAC Financing.
11.9%.
Yeah, he works in that 11.9%. One last time at the end because he doesn't want you to forget it. Who cares about the cars? Who cares about what's in the fleet of GM cars and light trucks and what they can do for you? It's about the rate. Heck, an 11.9% interest rate for a car at this point is so attractive that even if your driver's license was permanently suspended, you might just buy a Chevy Cavalier anyway, just to store it in the garage if you've got it at that rate. I mean, even if you don't ever use the car, to know you're paying 11.9, that peace of mind has got to be worth something. Wow. If you don't have a garage, hey, who cares? Put that car on blocks in the front yard. Who cares if it even comes with things like 4 tires and a steering wheel? Just lock up automobile debt at 11.9%. Oh, the opportunity cost of not doing that. All right, let's fast forward 6 years to the year 1989, and this is the last ad we'll play. Now, it isn't just America, but it's Canada too that is getting access to these rates that would almost be considered punitive today. This 1989 ad is a dealer-specific ad. It's from Holiday Chevrolet Oldsmobile in Winnipeg, Manitoba. Let's see how low rates are now.
At Holiday Chevrolet Oldsmobile, now's the time to get the best possible price on a new Chevrolet Oldsmobile, plus tremendous savings with 9.9% GMAC financing. 9.9% on this 89 Cavalier, priced at only $98.26, saves you more than $1,500 over your 4-year term. Or ride in style in the 1989 Oldsmobile 98 Regency and save $3,840. 9.9% GMAC financing. There won't be a better time to buy.
Like he said, there won't be a better time to buy. Whoa, 9.9%. We're in single digits now. We're under 10%. Well, there sure was a better time to buy, like, for example, any time since then. I mean, my gosh, not just 9.9, but the fact that if you buy, you'll get to drive an Oldsmobile, and you'll get to drive your Oldsmobile around Winnipeg. I mean, geez, talk about your quality of life exceeding your cost of living. Man, that is more than just eking out an existence. You are living right there. And again, this 9.9 isn't just some oh by the way thing. This is the main selling point. So, getting on with our brief history about mortgage rates. Rates for both homes and cars kept falling throughout the 1990s. In 2000, mortgage rates were around 8%. In 2002, when I bought my first fourplex building, that rate was 6 3/8%. And I still remember when signing my documents with Wells Fargo at the title company, people were almost incredulous that I was getting such a low rate. Well, 1 year later, in 2003, I was able to refinance that very same fourplex building at 5 3/8%. In 2010, the average 30-year fixed amortizing mortgage rate fell below 5%. In 2012, it went under 3.5%. And then in 2018, it had floated up to almost 5%. And bringing it up to the present day here, the 30-year fixed mortgage rate just hit a new historic low about a week ago of, little drum roll here, 3.23%. Yes, that is the lowest rate on record. And Jerome Powell and the Fed recently pledged to keep their benchmark rate near zero. Looking into the future, Fannie Mae's Economic and Strategic Research thinks that the average will hit 2.9% later this year, which really isn't much lower than it is now, because when rates are this low, there is a resistance to them going lower. Banks need to make a profit. Now, investment property rates are typically going to be about 1% higher than all those rates that I cited, of course. Those rates were for primary residences. But that is your brief history of interest rates over the last 50 years. Freddie Mac has only been tracking mortgage rates since 1971. Well, no matter what era you're in, there's always uncertainty. Always. Pandemic times bring a greater measure of that uncertainty than usual. And with so much uncertainty, then what an optimist and a realist looks at is, now, well, what are those things that are certain then? Today, we really do have an almost incredibly low mortgage interest rate. We know that people are going to need a place to live, and we know that housing demand exceeds supply. All three of those things are true. Now, at one time in your life, you might have considered real estate investing in a world-class city, almost a trophy city like a New York, LA, London, Sydney, Hong Kong, Singapore. But you listen to a show like this and you realize quickly that world-class cities are rarely profitable from a cap rate perspective, from an income-producing perspective. Consider Chicago. Chicago is a world-class city, chock full of Fortune 500 companies, an incredibly diverse economy, and the population to make it America's third largest city. We deal with a provider there that offers you property in Chicagoland. So it's the Chicago suburbs, but yet they're just across the Illinois line in northwest Indiana, where the tax climate is substantially better. The provider currently has rental homes 97% occupied. They leased to 25 new tenants in the last month, which were more than each of the previous 2 months. Some of that is because they were just coming off of winter. Lenders are still lending and buyers are still buying in pandemic times, of course. I would expect your lender to ask for more documentation, and then your reward for that is these historically low rates. This provider collected over 100% of the rent that was owed for the month of April. Now, how does that happen anyway? Well, they do have a small percentage of tenants who are delinquent on the rent payment, but they've had several tenants pay their May rent early. So let's look at 2 live properties available now from this company that has beautifully renovated both of these properties. And then what they do is they screen and place a tenant for you, and they will also manage it for you if you prefer. That is called turnkey real estate investing. These are both ranch-style single-family homes, so all one story. On 169th Street in Hammond, Indiana, it's a 3-bed, 1-bath home, 1,184 square feet. The projected rent is $1,350. The sale price is $130,000. Yes, that is a 1.04 rent-to-purchase price ratio. The property has a garage. It's light blue in color. It's nicely renovated inside with plank flooring, and I see some stainless appliances in there. The second property is on West 62nd Avenue in Merrillville, Indiana. 3 beds, 2 bathrooms in this one. The square footage is 1,450. Its projected rent is also the same as the first property, $1,350. Purchase price is $127,000. That's a 1.06 rent-to-price ratio. There's no garage on this one, a tan-colored home. It's been renovated with a really shiny-looking wood floor, though they could be planks, I'm not quite sure. The kitchen has a tile floor. So they are the 2 available properties. Both properties have annual property taxes of about $2,700 each. That's around 2%. That's somewhat higher than you'll find in a lot of places around the country. And both of the homes were built around 1950. And now the market value of each is around $135,000, your likely appraisal amount that is there. And again, the prices are just $130K and $127K respectively. To learn more and see the photos and connect with the provider directly, go to getricheducation.com/Chicago to get rent-to-value ratios like that and historically low mortgage interest rates with proximity to world-class Chicago. To connect with the provider again, go to getricheducation.com/Chicago. We're talking about how all of the money redistribution of the CARES Act can benefit you next. I'm Keith Weinhold. This is Get Rich Education. Property investors can get killed with maintenance costs. That's less likely when you buy brand new construction. Let me tell you about JWB Real Estate Capital in bustling Jacksonville, Florida. They pioneered the build-to-rent model where you can invest in new construction, turnkey rental property. That's why JWB was featured on the front page of the Wall Street Journal. To learn more and see inventory, start now at newconstructionturnkey.com. Finally, with Total Control Financial, get checkbook control of your existing 401k and IRA funds to invest in real estate. Yes, you can move your retirement money into your own checking account, but you must avoid the little-known tax that you'll get hammered with in a self-directed IRA. Instead, start your QRP. Learn more and get your free copy of the QRP book by text messaging QRP in all capital letters to 72,000.
This is Cashflow Diaries Jay Massey. Do the right thing, then do things right. Listen to Get Rich Education with Keith Weinhold.
We're with returning guest and friend of the show here. Welcome back to Get Rich Education, Damion Lupo.
Keith, it's good to be back, man.
Damion, we want to talk about the CARES Act updates and how that impacts our listeners. But before we get into that, we haven't had you here on the show since the pandemic hit and life started to get pretty weird for everybody. So why don't you tell us one place where you think that the pandemic has affected real estate in a bad way? And then the good news, one place where you think that the pandemic has affected real estate in a good way.
Well, I would say the cons are the bad way. It blew apart a lot of models, the assumptions like with Airbnbs or student housing. Yeah. A lot of those things we thought were golden, and our models said we might lose 5 or 10%, but we never really thought about 100% loss. So I think the assumptions, it's really causing us to challenge those and maybe look at some type of diversification amongst real estate so that if one black swan craps on one pile of your stuff, it's not everything dead. In terms of the pros, I see an unbelievable amount of opportunity that's coming, and it probably won't be in the next month or two, but my guess is by the end of this year or in 2021, those of us that, and you listening right now, boy, there's going to be some opportunity that you probably haven't seen in your lifetime.
That's right. As far as the bad news, yeah, it helps to be somewhat diversified in real estate. And it's interesting. Last year, I was bringing up the point that with short-term rentals, they cater to two primary types of people, business travelers and vacationers. And we have not seen what happens with Airbnb types of short-term rentals in a recession. And we are now, and they're hurting more than most places. And then some of the good news is, yeah, low mortgage interest rates, historically low, although you do have a higher bar to clear with more lenders getting more stringent with their requirements. Damion, since you were last here, you launched a podcast, Financial Underdogs. Tell us about that.
It's actually kind of an amazing thing thinking about how most of us really think of ourselves as underdogs, that we're not part of the silver spoon elite. And realizing that, I thought, well, you know what? I've been like that. And even when I've made tons of money, I still felt like I was an underdog. So we're having conversations about really how to navigate as an underdog, how to move to the place where we're financially free with the shackles breaking. Because it's a different mindset. Like there's a hustle mindset and there's a rational, you can't be naive. You've got to really think about how the rich are operating and then find a team. And we talk about all that kind of stuff because honestly, it's more about the mindset and realizing that you're not alone. And I think that that was the point of bringing this to life, that we're all underdogs and we're in this together, kind of like the Corona thing. And we're having those conversations about the truth around money and my experience of losing 20 million, building it back up. And how to do that emotionally is probably harder than the actual tactical. And so sharing that with people, I think it's very helpful. So we just go into that, have some raw conversations every week.
Not only is Damion highly aware because he has this broad knowledge in finance and in real estate, but he's also a really good speaker. So check out Financial Underdogs at Apple Podcasts or wherever you get your podcasts. So, Damion, the CARES Act, it stands for Coronavirus Aid, Relief, and Economic Security Act. That was passed by Congress with overwhelming bipartisan support, and that was signed into law by President Trump back on March 27th, 2020. That's that over $2 trillion economic relief package, and that might be best known because that is the act that provided a check of $1,200 per adult that were below a certain income threshold. And the CARES Act also initiated some of those things that we've talked about here on the show the past month or two, where I've really gone into depth, like on the eviction moratorium and like on your mortgage loan forbearance options. Those big, long words there, by the way, basically means that for a while, tenants don't need to pay the rent and you don't need to pay your mortgage. The CARES Act, though, it also had some pretty major 401k and IRA pieces in it. Tell us about that.
One of the things that Congress realized was that there was a lot of money that people could potentially tap into, so they didn't have to write the check out of the U.S. Treasury. They could just give people some options. Traditionally, if you take money out of a retirement account early, there's a 10% penalty. So what they said is, all right, let's open some of that up. And they said there's a thing called a disbursement where you basically just pull money out. Normally, that'd be a 10% penalty. They said up to 100,000 of really any retirement account. We're going to allow you to take up to 100,000 and not pay a 10% penalty. And then we're going to give you some choices. And this is where it gets kind of exciting. You have some choices to pull the money out and just keep it. So if you do that, you have to pay taxes on it. It gets broken up over 3 years. So a third of that income that you pull out goes into your income taxes this year and you pay it next year. And then same for the following year and the following. That's one option. The cooler option for the disbursement part, and there's two different parts, is that you can take that money up to $100,000 out and then you can roll it over into another plan. And you have 3 years to do that. So you could either take it out, use it for whatever you wanted, maybe real estate investments, maybe to pay for your bills right now because you need it. You can also take it out of a current employer's plan, roll it into an EQRP and have control of it, whereas you may not have been able to do that before because they didn't let you take it out while you were still working. So it's a way to pull up to $100,000 out. Again, this is pretty much any plan that's out there. The employer has to allow it. So you have to go to the employer and say, hey, I want to be able to do this. All EQRPs are eligible and all IRAs should be eligible to pull the $100,000 out. So that's a big opportunity to pull money out, to roll it over. And once you roll it over into an EQRP, if that's what you wanted to do, now you've got options with real estate, with physical gold and silver. So it gave you a choice probably that you didn't have before because you were probably stuck in mutual funds if you had it in an employer's plan. So that was a big one to start with.
That's right. So just to clarify, with the 401k plan, previously, if you were under age 59 and a half, it's kind of like your funds were locked inside this safe. And to withdraw 401k funds, you had to pay a 10% penalty. And you also had to pay the tax on it because you had put pre-tax dollars in there. So break down some more how the CARES Act changes that.
Exactly right. So in the past, if you pulled money out, if you were allowed to, there typically was not an option to even do it. So if you were able to do it with a hardship or something, you would pay a 10% penalty, and then all the money you pulled out would be added to this year's income, and you'd have to pay taxes on it next time you filed taxes. So
all at one time.
All at one time, right? So with the CARES Act, you're able to pull money out in 2020, and you don't have to pay taxes on all of it in 2021. You get to split it up over 3 years. That's if you're going to just keep it. Now, if you want to roll it over, you can take it out and then you could either put it all back into the same plan in 3 years. You got 3 years, like it's kind of like an interest-free, penalty-free, no payment loan. Or at some point, could be next week or next month, you can roll it into an EQRP. And now you have control of $100,000 out of your plan or whatever's in there. It's up to 100% that's of the money in there. And so it gave you some options. It gives us an option to access $100,000 very easily, whereas we really didn't even have the option before.
Now, if someone takes these funds from a 401k, are there any other deleterious ramifications of them turning it into an EQRP?
No, that's the best part. It's literally a rollover. Yeah. So there's no tax, there's no penalty, there's no payments, there's nothing. It's just a tax-free, penalty-free rollover. And I think that was one of the unintended consequences of what Congress did. They said, oh, you can pay it back to a qualified plan within 3 years. Awesome. We now created a way to get money out of these 401ks. So certainly that wasn't their intention, but that's exactly what they wrote.
Now, are the mechanics any different if we're talking about accessing IRA funds? Of course, there are traditional and Roth.
Same thing. You just the difference is every IRA custodian has to let you do this, whereas not every 401k. If you work for a company and they haven't laid anybody off, they may just say, nope, we're not going to allow the disbursement. We're not changing our plan. With custodians, it's simply saying, hey, I want to pull $100,000 or whatever your number is, and they're going to give it to you personally. And then at that point, you have up to 3 years to push it back into a retirement plan or back into the IRA, tax-free, penalty-free, no payments.
Now, perhaps a new listener is wondering, what is this QRP or EQRP? Well, those are acronyms for Qualified Retirement Plan or Enhanced Qualified Retirement Plan. Tell us about the benefits of an EQRP and how that gives you the latitude to invest in almost anything where those other more defined plans limit what you can invest in.
Well, the EQRP, the Enhanced Qualified Retirement Plan that we set up at the EQRP company, gives you a checkbook for your money. It allows you to be in control because you get to be the trustee. So if you've got a company plan right now, or even an IRA with a custodian, there's somebody between you and your money. And what we do is we set up a plan that protects your money from lawsuits and gives you a checkbook so that you can go control it and invest in things like real estate, gold, private equity, all the different things that you're restricted from. Because let's be honest, you don't have that many options in a 401k. The options are mutual fund A, B, C, or D. And with an IRA, you might have more options. It's just a lot clunkier, and there's a lot of friction, and there's a lot of fees that honestly aren't necessary.
And the EQRP can help you, the investor, legally circumvent some pretty nasty tax treatment down the road that a lot of people aren't getting when they're outside of a QRP and don't realize that. Tell us about that tax treatment difference.
Yeah, so there's a couple of things. One, with the EQRP, you avoid the UBIT tax. And if you're not familiar with that, if you used an IRA and you went out and bought real estate, you could lose up to 37% of your profits from this UBIT tax. And with an EQRP, bottom line is it's exempt. So you go do real estate, you make a lot of money, you've got some debt in that deal, and you get to keep all your money. That's a huge thing just by itself as you're going and doing deals. And the other thing is with an EQRP, no matter how much money you make now or in the future, you can convert up to all of your money to Roth. And when you do that, you're not going to pay taxes on all that growth and all the withdrawals down the road. So you've got some opportunities to go into the 0% tax bracket, which is what we'd all like to be in. We just don't often know how we're able to do that. And that's with the Roth conversion inside of an EQRP.
Yeah, it really gives you some options that I've never seen elsewhere. Well, Damion, is there any last thing with how the CARES Act has changed the QRP, or just with the structure of the QRP itself that our listeners should know?
There's a couple other things. One real easy one is there's no required minimum distributions, the RMDs. If you were taking money out, don't have to do that in 2020. And the other thing for just 401ks or EQRPs, if they have a loan provision in them, you're able to take out 100,000 or all of your money up to that 100,000 and then borrow it and pay it back for over 6 years. No payments for the next year, and then you pay it back over 6. And so this is a way, if you wanted to, you could potentially do that plus another 100. So you're talking 200,000. And if you happen to have a loan outstanding from any type of 401k or EQRP, no payments in 2020. You can just stop making them. So it gave you two different ways, disbursement and or a loan. So you've got different ways to pull money out, different strategies around the timing. And some of this stuff can be overwhelming, just trying to figure out, well, which should I do? And this is where having a team or having us walk through those options, which we can do with a client or a non-client, just getting that stuff in front of you so you can figure out what makes the most sense, not just so you can get a bunch of money, but what are you going to do with it? How long do you need it? Should you move it into another plan? Should you buy an asset that has some maybe bonus depreciation that you could use then for a net operating loss backwards look and amend a tax return? Like there's some interesting strategies to pull money out of retirement accounts right now and get money that you paid on taxes in 2015 and 2016 that also changed because of the CARES Act. A lot of opportunities here to mesh these different strategies together. So getting together with your tax strategist, your CPA, with us, huge important thing to do right now.
The QRP maximizes your flexibility. Damion and his company are the world's foremost experts in helping you get started with the QRP, helping you understand it. If needed, a lot of times your current custodian doesn't want to give up those funds. If it's absolutely necessary, Total Control Financial will actually contact them for you and be sure that they get your money on your behalf so that you can control it. Damion, you also authored a QRP book. If anyone wants to know more about the QRP, what's the best way for them to do that?
Best way to get a hold of information about this is to text the word QRP, all caps, to the number 72,000. And we'll get you a consolidated report and also give you a book. If you're interested in a physical book, we'll FedEx it out to you. Like you said, Keith, when people are trying to get their money out, we're on the phone with them or by ourselves tackling that money so that you don't have to get ground into the ground by the system. We're actually going to be there. It's part of the concierge service of making sure that we take the friction out, and we'll take the brunt of the force being punched and kicked by the system. We'll take it on for you.
If this sounds at all interesting to you, I think you at least owe it to yourself to find out more. Text QRP in all capital letters to 72,000 right now. Damion Lupo, thanks so much for coming back onto the show.
Thanks, Keith.
Well, when it comes to finding opportunity in a crisis, Damion Lupo just helped show you how. So the QRP, more flexibility, better tax treatment, and you don't have to prove a hardship to access your funds during this time. If you think it's in your best interest, you can steer your investments out of stock-based holdings. And what all can you invest your funds in anyway with the QRP? It is quite a long list. You can invest your QRP funds in real estate with or without debt, syndications, rentals, flips, domestic land, foreign land, mobile home parks, apartments, gold, silver, and platinum, the physical type that you can hold on to, not just held by someone else in a vault. You can invest in mortgage notes, oil and gas, private equity, hard money lending where you can be the bank, options, franchises, and on and on. Thanks to Damion Lupo today. If this sounds like it could be of interest to you, learn about your options with Damion and the EQRP company. That's the call to action this week. Like most weeks, I like to start off the show with something educational and leave you with something actionable. You can text QRP in all capital letters to 72,000. I'm Keith Weinhold, back next week and every week since 2014 to help you build your wealth. Don't quit your daydream.
Nothing on this show should be considered specific, personal, or professional advice. Please consult an appropriate tax, legal, real estate, financial, or business professional for individualized advice. Opinions of guests are their own. Information is not guaranteed. All investment strategies have the potential for profit or loss. The host is operating on behalf of Get Rich Education, LLC exclusively.
The preceding program was brought to you by your home for wealth building, GetRichEducation.com.